Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Podcasting Smarter September Live. We are so excited to be here with you today. Welcome back. We are here today for our September Live panel event, How to Make a Podcast Ad, where the experts here at Podbean are sitting down to discuss what goes into making an impactful podcast ad, from music, whether you have host read or not, having a clear value proposition, and more. We're joined today by Podbean's Senior VP of Advertising, Kerry Tracy, and Director of Customer Success, John Kiernan. I'm your host, Podbean's Head of Events, Norma Jean Belenke. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast. So if you're listening on the podcast, you're in the right place. We are brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 620,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And now we'll jump in and get started. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Norma Jean.
How's it going?
Good. It's so nice to be with you both. We're here today to talk about ads. I'm so excited. So before we jump in, let's just introduce ourselves for a second. Kerry, if you want to start.
Sure. I am Senior Vice President of Advertising for Podbean, and I handle the advertising revenue for the podcasts on the network.
Absolutely. And John.
Yep. So my name is John, and if you've been listening to Podcasting Smarter for quite some time, you may have heard my voice in different roles. I am currently the Director of Customer Success with Podbean, so I work a lot with our enterprise and high traffic podcasters in order to make sure that they're as taken care of as possible.
Absolutely. So we have got a great conversation for you here today because we're all so excited to talk about ads. I think so many podcasters have these questions, where's the monetization? And companies are now starting to ask, how can I make an impact through podcasting? So let's get started. Kerry, I'm going to direct this first question to you. What do brands want?
Well, what brands are most interested in is really the audience. They're buying audiences, and the power of podcasting is the length of engagement that people listen to podcasts as opposed to other media. So when you listen to or watch TV or listen to radio station, it may be passive, where in most cases with podcasting, it's really active listening. Particularly if it's episodic, where you can't kind of space out and you have to go back and listen to it again. But that really is the power of podcasting, is the fact that people are engaged and they feel that they connect with the host. It is certainly a powerful medium, and the results of podcasting is really starting to show with a lot of brands. But to answer your question, they're really buying audiences, and
Okay.
that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. So, it sounds like, honestly, the people and the sheer number of people. We can talk about niche later because I think that's also a really important aspect. But audiences are gonna the bigger your audience, from an aggregate standpoint, the bigger your audience, the more opportunity for monetization, the more people listening who may want to buy a product that is featured on your podcast. So absolutely. And John, I want to direct this next question to you. Why make an ad for your business or podcast, versus maybe other mediums?
Sure. I think when it comes to marketing your content, whether it's a brand, a podcast, well, at the end of the day, a podcast really is a brand too, right? What we often think about are all these different
Yeah.
promotional outlets that you can take. But creating a podcast ad is very similar to creating something like just a quick, brief press kit. We talk about press kits all the time here. But really,
Yes.
what you're able to do is you're able to take all of this content or like a really concise message and viewpoint of your podcast and deliver it to a specific audience that you're looking to target. So with something like a podcast ad, if you're trying to promote your podcast and grow your audience, being able to hit someone with a quick 15, 30 second, or even up to a 60-minute or not 60-minute, a 60-second podcast ad,
Yeah.
you can really make people understand what your show is about. You can paint a quick image about what you're trying
Mm.
to get at through your ad. And what you can hope to do is you can hope to bring in more of an audience that way. And the thing is, when you run an ad that's really effective, you really engage with people in that specific medium, especially like Kerry was saying. Kerry is the master at everything on this, so I will always refer back to him
Yes.
at this juncture. But when it comes to the medium of podcasting, which is such an engaging medium and has such
Yes.
loyalty with the fan base of any given podcast and in the medium in general, doing something like a podcast ad is essential for growing your brand, growing your podcast, and selling your service.
Absolutely, John. And there are a couple of things that I just want to highlight in what you said. The first is the trust with the audience. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about host read versus pre-produced ads. And then also there is that emotional component, right? When you're listening to audio, you're hearing the emotion in people's voice versus maybe a click-through ad, something that's just visual exclusively. Especially, also print, billboards, things like that as well. Kerry, do you have any takes on that in terms of why podcasting?
Well, podcasting for a lot of advertisers and brands are still relatively new. But what
Yeah.
over the last couple of years has shown the folks that have dug into it are really doubling up this year. And the interesting thing is, when you look at the landscape overall in the younger audiences, I look at my college age and my own kids a little older. They really don't watch TV anymore. So that shift of people going from their consumer habits and listening habits and watching habits, going from watching TV to really listening more.
Mm.
It's so difficult to capture people, and you have to understand what their lifestyle is and where they spend their time in media. Starting
Oh,
to
yeah. No, that's such a great point.
and so
Wow.
brands are really starting to take their budgets and reallocate them towards streaming, whether it be, Netflix is starting to take advertising now. So Netflix, on the audio side too, it's a really powerful medium in the sense that it's portable, it's on demand, and it's incredibly engaging. And the host is really relating to these people. And you had asked me earlier about, you know, I think the most important thing as an advertiser is that you have to keep that audience in mind. Who are they, and what are they most interested in? And what is the content of that particular podcast? What are they listening to? And the brand really should align with that type of content and who the listener is. I think that's where you're going to have the most, effective campaign and results. And Sounds Profitable, which is run by Brian Barletta, he was, gave a conference down at the podcast movement. They had recently done research called After These Messages. And
Yes.
the amazing thing about that research, and again, coming from my background, I always take a lot of the research with a grain of salt based on who's doing it, but
Right.
research after research is showing that people who listen to a podcast ad, 70% are either going to the site or checking out the discount or the coupon code, and then 66% of those people are actually taking action on it. So that comes out to
Wow.
like 46%, which is pretty amazing. I mean,
That's incredible. I mean, what other advertising mediums get that kind of result?
very few, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
There are ad agencies now that just focus just on podcasting. I mean, they came from
Yeah.
radio, but they're starting to focus on that 100%. Now, again, I'm not going to promise an advertiser that you're going to get 50% people taking action. That's just insane. On the digital side, you're lucky if you get 3 to 5%. That
Right. 5% is
a great
lucky. Yeah.
campaign. So again, this research I think that's coming out is a little one-sided in the sense that it's still early on, in terms of we're still in the infancy of podcasting. We got a long way to go, but the research right now is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, you briefly touched on possibly the trust that audiences have in a host. And I think also, the specifics about matching the brand with the right content, right? And what's so great about podcasting as an open medium, everybody can create a podcast. And so advertisers have the opportunity to find their ideal audience, right? It's not buying off the rack so much anymore. It's really more tailored.
Right.
If we're going to use a clothing analogy, it's like bespoke almost, because especially with host read, which we'll get into in a bit. I want to just, before we jump into host read and a lot of the exciting aspects of how the advertising is delivered, I want to talk about best practices for making an ad. So, John, let's jump in a bit there before we get ahead of ourselves, because I mean, we can just nerd out on ad, the growth of ads with podcasting, which I want to do in a little bit. But John, let's talk a little bit first, and Kerry, about best practices for ads. So, can you do it yourself? What are we going to include? Let's start there.
Sure. I think one of the most important things for creating an ad for the podcasting environment is making it succinct and making sure that what the message you're saying is what the message needs to be, no more, no less. At the same time, as engaging as the podcasting medium is, you are also taking somebody's time, right? So you want to make sure that you say what you have to say, you can promote your product, make it engaging, and then get back to whatever the podcast host is talking about. So I've always thought that if you can make your podcast ad really just about what you're talking about, you're going to set yourself up for success. And there's a lot of different ways that, and a lot of different podcast ads that you hear out there. Some have, let's say, background music, for example, that can help set the tone. Others are just someone speaking to you and being really engaging in that way. And again, it comes down to, how do you want to brand your product? How do you want to portray what you're trying to deliver through your podcast ad? I think there's benefit to both. I think sometimes with having background music in a podcast ad, it can really help paint the scene a little bit more. However, I do think that if you remove that background music and you're just speaking to the audience, sometimes that can be even more engaging. And depending when this comes out, I actually did an interview with some of our winners from a recent How to Make a Podcast Ad contest, and we spoke exactly about this. And one of the winners had this incredible ad where they did different voices, they added background music, and then one of the gentlemen who had won, they literally just spoke to the camera, basically, and just delivered the content in a really succinct, really clear voiced, and really calm way. And both of the ads were extremely effective. The one condition that we had was keep it right at 30 seconds. And while they said that that was something that might have been difficult to do up front, they understood that it needed to be 30 seconds to really hit as quick as possible, get in, get out. And I'd love to hear Kerry's feedback on that too.
Yeah, Kerry?
Yeah, no, you guys did an amazing job with, and it was so interesting to see them get into it, and the creativity that Podbean has with the hosts, that what they can offer from all different angles and all different audiences. But I mean, you're the expert on the production side, of which you guys do an amazing job. I look at it from an advertiser's perspective, and we ask the same questions as we would almost in any ad campaign, whether it be podcasting, digital, or traditional. But we'll look at what's their goal. Are they trying to is this a pure brand awareness campaign that they just want to let people know about their brand? Or is it a pure DR campaign? Are they driving people to a website, or are they driving them to a store? Where they really have set up certain metrics, and anticipate some type of return. And those metrics could be a number of things, which we don't have to get into now. But
No, I think that's really important. Understanding, what is your clear offer, right? Are you focused on direct response, like click this link, buy the product right now, which a lot of ads very successfully do. And so if you have a product, like, find us, come, like, we're here. And then also on that branding side, a lot of products, maybe are a longer purchasing, it takes longer to purchase, or they're more frequently purchased, so it's really just about being top of mind. And so it is important to have that brand awareness. So I would love for both of you to kind of walk us through, for a direct response, what do you want to make sure is in that ad versus on a branding ad? If it's pure branding, it's more about the values of the brand and the
yeah, so
company.
just to get back to, so earlier I was talking about there are three things we look at. One is goal. What
Yeah.
are you trying to do? Secondly, who's the target audience? And then thirdly, what's the budget? The budget is going to dictate what you can't do. It's almost like buying a house. What neighborhood should I be going to is going to be based on, what your budget is, the size of the house. Very,
Yeah.
very similar. And that's, kind of the approach that we take. Now, as far as metrics are concerned, you asked branding versus direct response. Direct response is all about ROI. I'm going to spend this much. How much of a return am I going to get? How many products am I going to sell online? How many people am I going to drive into the store? How do you track it going into the store? It's the same way as you would online. It's, a discount code. Or you can see, a bump. We talk about attribution. Attribution is a lot easier digitally than it is on broadcast. But and the challenge that a lot of the bigger brands had in the past is that they looked at podcasting as kind of the Wild West. Over the last 2 years, the attribution tools that are available are just as good as any of the digital tools. It is a digital tool, and so the way that you would look at a branding campaign is you want to see how many people have actually visited the site, not necessarily even purchased it. You can see, after that campaign ran, how many people went to your website, and you can have the long tail effect too. You can look, 3-4 weeks out after that campaign ran, how many people have come back and, looked at it. And that's the beauty of DAI, is that you can run with digital, your ad insertion. You can run it for a specific period of time if it's an offer.
Yeah.
Whereas with baked in, sometimes it's great, but there's also a drawback to it, because if you're having, a Labor Day sale that is baked into, an episode, and you're going to be listening to,
Right.
during the holidays, it may not be.
It's not relevant. Absolutely. Right. You've lost the window. And for everybody out there, I just want to clarify a little bit. Dynamic ad insertion is where we can insert a fresh ad into the entire back catalog of a podcast show. And so you can deliver, new messaging, new offers to your, ideal audience when you have them, even for episodes that maybe are really popular, that still get, many, many, many listens, thousands, millions of listens. But you can still serve fresh ads. So that's what that dynamic ad insertion is. And baked in is a term that we use where the ad is part of the episode. So it forever will be part of that episode, so that you can't keep refreshing it and offering, maybe fresh offers or updates on product or anything like that as well. So I think that is such an important distinction. And John, from a production standpoint, what are just some basics that we want to include when you're making a podcast ad, both for direct response and then, possibly for branding, but like, obviously it's something where I know this is really maybe elementary or basic, but like because sometimes people even, when you're making a podcast, sometimes when you first start out, sometimes you can forget to, make an intro or say, hey, make sure that you follow the show on Podbean, all that kind of
Of
stuff.
course. And I would say for the direct response ad, I think it makes a little bit more sense what you would do up front. Because if you're trying to drive traffic to a certain result, or like Kerry said, you're trying to really track an ROI, you have to turn around and make sure that whatever you're delivering, wherever you want somebody to go, or whatever action you want somebody to take, you want to make sure that that's as clear as possible. With Podbean, sometimes some of the ads that we run are go to this specific website. And you'll hear us do things
Right.
even such as say the name of the website and then spell it out, podbean.com/ wherever we need you to go, because you only have that short time, and you want to make sure that within the confines of the audio realm, you have the ability to direct somebody there. I think when it comes to the other side of it, you can get a little bit more open as it comes to your branding, right? You think of some of these larger brands who they
Yeah.
just want you to be top of mind, as you were saying before. So it's really just getting their branding out there. It's really getting their message out there, who they are, what they sell. It's not always, so for example, right, if it's like a soft drink company, it's not always go to this website to purchase volume amounts of soft drinks. It's more, here's the
Right.
brand, here's the product, here's the polar bear in the middle of Christmas. I think you all know who I'm talking about.
Right. But so when you are thirsty, that's the brand of soda you would
Exactly.
go for.
And I think one
Exactly.
really important example that I've always thought of is think of Band-Aids. Band-Aid is the brand. It's really a medical adhesive, but the brand name has become so popular, they're not sitting there putting out advertising saying, go buy this at your local store or something like that. They're not driving that traffic. They're really just using their brand name to just keep you top of mind. God forbid you ever have need for a Band-Aid, here it is. So I think when you come from
Right.
a production standpoint, those are probably two big things to really think about depending on what your end goal is.
And the one thing I think that we'll start seeing more so as programmatic starts taking off is, the power of audio is music is so incredibly so. If you have
Yes.
A jingo, not
Jingle.
a,
Yeah. Like custom music for your brand. Yeah.
you've got that in your ear, for you're going to remember it. It's going to drive you crazy, and that's a sign of a good ad because you're like, I can't handle that anymore. So I think from a brand perspective, they look at reach, which is podcasts are able to do that now. You can reach a lot of people, and frequency is really
Yeah.
important. On the direct response side, the old rule of thumb was that you should be mentioning, whether it be an 800 number back in the old days or now, driving to a URL, you should mention that, as John mentioned, a minimum of 3 times. So people, and the reason why they said, why do I have to do 3 times? Well, kind of back in the old days, you would, would hit you first. You'd say, oh, this is pretty interesting. Second time, you'd get a pen or pencil, you'd write it down. Third time, you'd actually, take action. But now it's so easy to, on your phone, you can, tap to convert. And so I think there are going to be a lot of digital advancements as it relates to audio, whether you say, I'm interested, and that will bring you to the URL. However, that is coming down the line. It's not currently now, but I do think, and I'm kind of surprised by it. The host gets so enthusiastic about a product that they really believe in it, that their listeners,
Yeah.
Hey, this guy's authentic. I believe what they say, and he or she, and I'm going to buy that product. And so it's like, it's an endorsement, and that's exactly what these brands want. They want the host to say, "Look, I believe the product. I think you should buy it," and it's pretty powerful.
And I think you're actually
Yeah,
actually cut
absolutely.
you off. Sorry.
Oh, John.
I
Yep.
think you're hearing a lot more when it comes to host-read ads. Instead of it just being the person reading about the ad, you're hearing this personal experience. I think when I listen to a lot of podcasts, one thing that I hear, whether once or twice, is I've used this product, I believe this product, something akin to that. Because I think for what happens when it does come to advertisers or advertising, there's the other side of it where you don't want to inundate people too much with too much advertising. But if you have the host coming in and saying, this is actually something that I believe in, and I believe in the message or the product, that can be a great way for the advertiser to say, listen, try the product. And if you like it, then really speak to your own personal experience with it, because that's going to drive it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for everybody out there, to clarify, host read ads are when the host of a podcast, right? They come on in the ad break and they say, "Hey, I really like this product. I tried it. Here's why I liked it. If you want to try it too, here's a code, or here's a link to purchase it," that kind of thing. So it's really straightforward. And I think with podcasting specifically, there is a trust between the listener and the host in a way, because the medium that we listen to podcasts on, most people listen via their phone on an app. When you're listening on your phone, that's the same device you use to call your family. Right? So there is a subconscious trust there, right? And especially because there's not a visual component for most podcasting when you're listening, right? So you're able to have that kind of emotional connection as you would on a phone call. So it is very interesting in terms of the trust that the audiences have in hosts. And I think it's important, that's such a great aspect of podcasting. And just for everybody out there who's thinking, "Hey, I want to be on a podcast. I want my ad to be on a podcast." How do people go about booking host ads? John, do you want to take that one?
For booking host ads, and Kerry, please expand on this as well.
Sure.
Yeah, Kerry, we'll have you go next to fill
Everything I
in.
say, asterisk, defer to Kerry. So there's a couple of different ways. And what we've been seeing most recently is if somebody is looking to have, so you're asking if someone wants to have a host-read ad run on their show, basically, or if an advertiser wants to.
If an advertiser
Oh, sure.
wants to have a host read about their product, what's that process like? How do they get in contact?
Yeah.
How can they do that with us at
Yeah,
Well,
Podbean?
definitely. When it comes to host-read ads, one of the best ways for a brand to reach out to a podcaster is, and especially with what we've seen with a lot of our podcasters, is direct, right? If an advertiser wants to an advertiser wants a podcaster to read the ads that they're delivering on their show, a lot of the times the direct communication is best, email, whatever the case may be. So any podcaster,
Mhm.
please have your press kit ready to go. Also,
Yes, we talk about this all the time.
absolutely. And if you are a podcaster that's looking to have ads run, maybe on your website, have your press kit on there. Maybe what you do is you set up a 15-day campaign, 30-day campaign to reach out all sorts of different advertisers via email and different avenues with your press kit as well. What usually happens also is an advertiser will give you a script. And with that script, it'll have a lot of the times it'll have bullet points. A lot of the times it'll actually have the full read. Here's what I want you to actually read
Mhm.
fully. But in either way, you can use that to create your host read ad while you're in the show. And what's been great with dynamic ad insertion technology is we're saying what the host read is. The host is speaking the actual ad, right? With dynamic ad insertion, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I can record that ad on my end as a host read ad and then dynamically insert it
Yeah.
across all of the different shows under my umbrella with a platform like ours that gives you the power to do that.
Yeah, so just to back up a little in terms of the process. So we'll approach certain, advertising agencies who have certain brands, and we'll go directly to the brands and talk about the 34,000 podcasts that Podbean has. They'll come back and say, okay, these are the ones that we're interested in. These are the audiences we're interested. We come back, present, what the costs are, which ones make sense, and then they say, okay,
Yeah.
let's go with these. Then the process is we reach out to the hosts of the show. We tell them, are you interested? This is what they're willing to pay, and this is what the brand or the product is about. Now, some of these hosts will take that brand, some, and say, yeah, I'd love to endorse it, check it out. Some may say, it's really not my thing. I don't take that product, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, John's exactly right. Then the brand will typically will jump on an onboarding call, talk to them about the brand itself, the messaging that they want to get across, and they'll give them either the exact script that they have to read, or they'll give them talking points, and they want them to improvise and kind of give their take on it. And so that's the host read ad. And as you said, we can pre-record it and we can insert it, for the campaign. The other is the announcer read, where you can run it. You'll be able to run it programmatically. But what we did was a test with one of our clients on the self-serve side of the business, where you can just put an announcer read ad. Where the first campaign, the ad sounded, it was a radio ad basically, and they just dropped a 60-second radio ad in there, and it wasn't as effective as they anticipated it to be, because it sounded like a radio ad. So we spoke to them. We said, look, we think this could definitely work. These podcasts make sense for your audience, and we think you should do another ad where it gives you the impression that it is a host read ad, that someone's talking about the product that's a little more authentic, and it comes across as that podcast audience is kind of used to. And they ran it, and it did much better. It wasn't that hammer hitch over the head like some radio ads are. So it was interesting. I mean, we're learning as we go along, which the audiences are gonna, and it's like any advertising campaign. It's all about test and control. Which type of ads are going to work best for what audiences.
Yeah.
We're actually speaking with one of the largest advertisers in podcasting now, and what they're going to do is a test. It's going to be a 3-week cap, and they're going to do 3 different weeks. So when I say 3-week cap, it's going to be three times frequency for that week. And then we're going to do it for a number of separate weeks, as opposed to, trying to jam it all in 1 month. Or, they're finding that way you can track it better and you can have a little more control
Yeah.
over the campaign.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a difference because with podcast advertising versus maybe traditional radio. So if you have a business out there and you're thinking, "Oh, we've advertised on radio, we know how to do this." There are some nuances in terms of the
Oh,
messaging,
definitely.
right? It's more
Mm-hmm.
personal. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit more about that, Kerry?
Yeah, I think that, again, the amazing thing, we've done attribution tests in the past with different media, whether it be, TV, radio, digital. And the one thing that keeps coming back up again and again is the length of engagement with podcasts. When you talk about a podcast
Yeah.
that's episodic, you got them hooked. They're repeat customers. And
Right.
the beauty of any business is if you can get a repeat customer, you're going to build a really good business. And I think that that's what podcasting realized early on, is that these endorsements from the host are incredibly powerful. And if you can, set up a podcast that have people coming back again and again, then, you're building your brand and you're building a really good business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the way that the ad is formatted and the messaging, what are some best practices there? Obviously you're going to want to get the highest quality recording that you
Yeah.
can. That's always a pretty standard,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Whether you're recording it yourself, you're outsourcing, and obviously if you are contracting the host to do a host read ad, they're going to have the same quality for the ad that they would for the show. So that's always a nice guarantee as well. But what are some other best practices there in terms of the ad format?
Well, I think for pre-rolls, which is,
Yeah.
before the show starts, there 30 seconds will tend to work best, because if it's too long, if it's a 60-second or 2 minute,
People are gonna skip
they're going
maybe,
to,
yeah.
exactly, they're going to skip it. And in our business, the advertiser only pays for what they're listened to. So IAB regulation or compliance is that they have to listen to at least a minute of that ad. So you are truly getting what you paid for, which is amazing. I mean, there are other media channels
Yeah.
that there are no guarantees.
Right, you're not gonna get those
Right.
metrics. You're not gonna get those guarantees because the way that they track listenership or viewership is aggregate or different, or I don't wanna say obsolete, but from a different time period.
Yeah, I mean, with traditional media, you bought TV, radio. I mean, yeah, if you were buying the
Right.
Super Bowl, you were guaranteed a certain amount of ratings because the amount of money that you're spending. But absent that, you rarely, you kind of like, it's going to run, and that's what I get, and same
Right.
with billboards, all that type of stuff. But digital, it's become a little more, and I think in the case of podcasts, they hold you to a higher standard because it's kind of newer. People didn't know about it, and what is being put in place is going to be a lot stronger
Mhm.
than a lot of the other media channels. So I think it's important. But in terms of best practices, I think John hit it on the head earlier. It's when you listen to a podcast host or an ad that they're super enthusiastic and it's really creative, you'll probably won't skip it. It's kind of part of the whole, podcast experience that either the host is reading it, or even if you have an announcer read host, if it's engaging enough, they'll listen to it. But I think it really comes down to, um, making sure that the ad that you read or the talking points that you read is of interest to that audience. So I think that's key. And enthusiasm, certainly, humor, all that type of stuff, makes it a little more authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's just at this point, it sounds like you wanna make sure that your ad is really exciting and kinda grabs the listener. You wanna make sure that you have either a clear value proposition or people know what the brand is. You wanna make sure that you have a high quality recording, or at least the highest quality that you can manage at that time. And then you wanna make sure that you're considering your audience. I think those are all really clear. And And I think that, the format is going to be different for different, obviously, audiences, but also for different time slots. So, Kerry, you touched on this briefly. Generally, within ads for podcasting, there are 3 positions. There's pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll. Obviously, pre is right before the episode airs, mid is in the middle of the episode, and you can always as a podcaster, you can choose that timestamp of where those ads are going to go, so it doesn't clip off mid sentence or anything. And then post is going to be after the episode. So I think it is important to also remember like how much time you're using. Is it 15 seconds? Is it 30? Is it 60? And Kerry, you also touched on pre-roll being 30 seconds being ideal. But are there any best practices for where the ad is placed? Like if let's say you have a business, maybe you have like a chain of coffee shops and you want to advertise on podcasting, is there best practices for each format, whether it's mid-roll, post-roll, or pre-roll?
Typically, in terms of value, the advertisers have always valued the mid-roll more. You pay more for a mid-roll.
That's right.
But over the past year, that's starting to shift where the pre-rolls are starting to become almost as valuable as a mid-roll. And then post-rolls are typically either they're promoting their next show or they're cross-promoting other podcasts. Is that where a lot of people will, heavy up there? But in terms of positioning the mid-roll, pre-roll, it's in the beginning, but mid-roll, you are starting to see some folks starting to front load the mid-rolls, meaning that they're going to, you try to move it up as close as you can to the front, you're going to get more impressions. The thought is that the further back, people may get a little tired or they may be more apt to skip it, or they may stop it. And then when they come back to return, they push it. So,
Okay, got it. So just for clarification here, an example would be maybe there's an hour-long podcast, and instead of your mid-roll being at the midpoint of the episode, 30 minutes, it might be at 15 minutes now.
Right, exactly.
So after the first 15 minutes of the episode, you would hear those mid-roll ads, and they would have a better response.
Right, and I think as podcasting grows, you're already starting to see, again, the power of podcasting is that it only typically, when it started, it was only 3 ads, if that. You may only have 1.
Right.
And now, and again, I don't want to knock programmatic because you can control that, but what you want to be leery of is putting in too many ads in there. TV's had that problem, radio's had that problem, but it's such a great medium. People are going to figure it out. They're going to get that feedback. Either the host is going to get it directly, and they're going to say I have to hold back. In the case of programmatic, you want to make sure that it runs smoothly.
So programmatic has been a bit of a buzzword recently within the industry. So for everybody out there who may not be familiar, Kerry, can you just briefly explain what programmatic podcast advertising is and how it works?
Sure. So the term programmatic has been used loosely, particularly over the last couple of years. People say, we've got programmatic because they can use DAI and they can choose by audiences. The reality is that programmatic is you need to have an SSP, which is a supply side platform that publishers will use to put their shows out there. And the bigger agencies have a DSP, which is demand side platform, and they have the ability to buy those shows. So the power of the DSP, and the DSP's been around for a while on the digital side, is that they can buy by demo and they can buy behaviorally. So you can.
Okay, so they can buy by demographic, and then behaviorally, can you just give us an example there?
So from a demo perspective, that's male, female, age, household.
Right, age.
Right. And when you talk about behavioral, you talk about people who are into health and fitness, people who happen to shop at Target. So you can really layer that. I think we have almost 1,000 segments actually through Nielsen. So it can get very granular. The more granular you get, the smaller your audience is going to get. So with some high-end brands, use a Rolls-Royce as an example, you can, get really granular by zip code, by buying habits, so we are on par with all the other media channels in terms of that's the beauty of programmatic. And
Beautiful.
programmatic with the larger brands, you'd mentioned like Coca-Cola or American Express, whatever the case may be. You can scale it, so you can the one drawback with host read ads is that you have to have each host do the ad, and so it's kind of a long process that you have to go through, and you may not have the ability to scale. Whereas with programmatic, we can run it one ad, we can run it globally in different languages. So it's probably one of the strongest mediums from that perspective in terms of reach.
Absolutely. And programmatic wouldn't be host read because you're really inserting the ad almost in real time. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, you're still, yes, you're going to buy it. The campaign is going to typically be based on impressions. So I want to get this many impressions for this period of time. And then you can do frequency caps too. So you're not listening to the same message over and over again. You may say, the way the impressions are based on IP addresses. So
Yep.
if Norma Jean or John listen to that ad, they've recorded that, they know that you've been there, and they're not going to serve that ad up to you again for another, until, 3 times for that week, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. So if you're an advertiser and you're looking to, just really make an impression with a specific demographic or with a specific audience that maybe has, like you said, Kerry shops at Target, right? It's something where you can directly target that audience, and it's not through a specific podcast, which is great and is incredibly valuable in its own way. But with programmatic for specific campaigns, it can be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're really buying the audience, and you're buying their behavior and what they're most interested in. So,
Right.
Programmatic is a small part from a revenue standpoint in podcasting, but that's going to start growing quickly.
Absolutely. And so for those programmatic ads, if we're looking at, how to make a podcast ad, which is what we're kind of talking about here today, but also, all of podcast advertising really, because it's such an exciting time. If we're looking at how to make those ads, it's really something where you want it to be audience specific, right? You're not focused that much on the show's content that your ad's going to run on and maybe how it fits in there, but you're really focused on this is the target audience. This is what we're saying to them.
Yes. So there are creative audio agencies that are starting to pop up, and they're looking at the research behind podcasting ads. They're starting to test a lot of those ads, and again, I think one of the areas that you're going to start seeing more of music being a part of these programmatic ads, because again, you have that earworm in there that you can't get rid of that song or that tagline. But I think we'll start seeing more of that.
Absolutely. And for host read ads, there's also the cost of recording can also be higher, right? So for host read ads, I think there is a minimum campaign that needs to be run to make it worth the host's time to take their time and record that ad and make sure that it's set up. But for non-host read ads, I mean, you can record a pretty good ad for a lower amount of money, right? So John, let's talk a little bit about that. And then also Kerry mentioned music, which I know is also in your wheelhouse.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, when it comes to producing high quality audio in 2022, when this is being recorded here, the great news is it's fairly simplistic for a budget, whether it's on your own or bringing in a company to do it for you, fairly low cost to be able to produce something fairly high quality. So long as the content that you're delivering is succinct and is good, then all you need is something that you can basically pick up at local retailers, whether it's even like $100 microphone. A lot of the computers and mobile devices that we have nowadays have built-in software that you can record directly into it. You can edit the audio once it's recorded, and you can polish it up, add compression, EQ, some of those things just to make it as professional and audio volume wise as possible, like hitting the limit for what you would hear on produced content, right? So using all those different mediums, you can really produce a pretty high quality piece of content in under an hour if you have everything set up from that way. And Kerry keeps mentioning music, which is near and dear to my heart.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of companies are going to these libraries that have lots of music, right? So let's say you
Yes.
have, for example, an
Yes.
advertisement that you want to position for something like wellness or something, right? There's a lot of content out there musically that would really fit that, whether it's for more of an energetic kind of feel or whether it's for example, a little bit more of like a calm, a little bit more of a Zen kind of feel, right? Something that has more meditative properties to it musically. You can go to some of these libraries, and these libraries can have that music already produced for you.
Mhm.
You can go ahead and purchase a license where you can use it for whatever needs you would need to, right?
Mhm.
The other thing, though, I will say on that, there's a positive and a negative. The positive side of that is that you can get music that really does fit what you're looking to do, but to get the earworm piece that Kerry is talking about and really deliver your message, custom music could be the way to go. And we think of all these different kinds of ads, right? We think of State Farm, we think of Safe Light, we think of all these different ads where they actually have a piece of music that has the name or it
And
has a
it's
little
unique to
tag.
them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it definitely needs to be said that those are the ones where I think the earworm really catches somebody. Somebody's walking down the street, and we a lot of us think of the Aflac bird, right? The Aflac saying the name of the brand. Things like that are really small things that you can do to make sure that people remember your brand, even somebody that isn't looking for the product that you're putting out right away. And that's a big part of marketing too. You're always looking to go after somebody who is looking for the product that you're putting out. But in the event that they're not at that point, you still want to be top of mind in the event that they do need your product. And you get there, I think, more with custom music. And a lot of these people who put out the custom music for you, you can create a full piece of music that's 2 or 3 minutes and then take the ending 15 tag or the
Mm.
beginning 15 tag and use that in your commercial. So you have a lot of it. You have a 15, you have a 30, you have a 60, which are some common timestamps that you're going to hear for tags, even something as quick as a 3-second tag. So if you're looking into writing a piece of music, and this is for someone who may want to write music for advertisers, for those in this audience, always get the skill set down of being able to create a full piece of music that then you can translate into a 60-second, a 30-second, a 15-second, and just a small 3-second tag. And as somebody who's putting the content into their own ad, realize that you might have those barometers there as well.
That's really important, and I think in terms of getting music that matches the feeling of your brand, it's not gonna be the exact same music for 15 seconds, you're not gonna double it up for 30, but you wanna have, those auditory signatures that are
Right.
attached to your brand, so when people hear it, they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's my product." So I think it's really an important aspect as well. And in terms of cost, like we were saying, you can create pretty great ads, pretty low budget, a couple $100, um, you know, with maybe a $200 budget. It's definitely, doable in today's marketplace, whether you're creating it yourself, whether you're externally creating it. And then on the host thread, like we mentioned, there is going to be probably a bigger cap. I would say in general, that's about $1,000 campaign minimum, for that host to be able to read the ad. And that's on the very, very low end.
But on with our self-service, not to push Podbean too much, but
Yeah.
on the self-service
No,
side,
that's why we're here.
we can do the announcer read ad for $100,
Yeah.
and they're really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the amount of talent that we have and what they deliver is incredible.
Absolutely. And that isn't really across the industry with Podbean. It's something where, we want you to be successful in your ad campaigns. And
Right.
we want our podcasters to have successful ad campaigns and keep podcasting. So it's definitely something where you want to just join Podbean. Well, Kerry, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about larger campaigns and coordinating kind of overall, because it seems like, from a specific ad standpoint, we've really talked about that. But a lot of podcast listeners, podcasters, advertisers are noticing that, there are larger campaigns that are possible. So what does that look like for a brand?
I think on the host read, again, it comes back to what your goal, target and budget is, and whether you want to do host read ads and or announcer read ads, or a combination thereof to test both. So I think larger brands most of the larger brands are doing a lot of test and control, both between host read and announcer read. So, but if you're doing it, a major campaign with, these Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, more likely than not, they're going to be doing a programmatic campaign. And it's typically going to come in through their agency. And so the way programmatic is structured and the relationships are set up with the agencies is that you can do a private marketplace where we'll go into an agency and we'll negotiate a certain CPM. CPM is the cost metric that we use in the industry. And so we'll allow them to maybe look at our top, 50 podcasts. And they have access to those podcasts at this certain CPM. And then we may say below those podcasts, it's open marketplace. You can go in and you can buy based on what the market will provide. So you can come down with the lower CPM. But typically with the private marketplace, you don't necessarily have to have a low CPM. You can negotiate it it's all about demand, supply and demand. So, you look at some of these top podcasts, use Joe Rogan as an example. Some of those are locked in through, the end of 2023. You can't get in there.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing, again, with a network like, Podbean, we've got 34,000 podcasts that
Yeah.
there's a lot of, really good inventory there that, you may not be able to get elsewhere. So inventory is going to be important. And, to answer your question, Norma Jean, at scale, most of these larger advertisers are going to start doing programmatic because it's really the only way that you can scale it.
Absolutely. And we have some exciting announcements about that coming up, I think a bit later this year. But it's something where, as podcasting advertising grows in terms of the aggregate and the overall market, brands that want to have, huge global campaigns are able to do that now, and if you're a podcaster from that side, right, you can be part of that, which is great, because especially like, we keep talking about Podbean. We're from Podbean. We love Podbean. That's us. But it's something where, you get to be part of that larger collective trend and benefit of it, because we have our ads marketplace, because we have our ad platforms built into our hosting and our overall solution here. So it's pretty cool. Before we end today, it's been just such a pleasure to speak with both of you. I think we've really covered, what brands want. If you are a brand and you're looking to podcast, how do you get started? How do folks get started? Kerry?
Yeah, there are a couple of ways. You talking about specifically Podbean, or you just talk about in general?
Podbean, but also in general, best practices.
Yeah. In the case of Podbean,
always Podbean.
Yeah. In the case of Podbean, I'd love to talk to you. We consider, but there are a couple different options. One is self-serve, where you can go into our sponsorship brand's URL, and you can open up a free account, and you can basically go in there and just play around with, you can target by geo, you can target by category, you can target by individual podcasts. And there you can set the CPM, you can set your budget. It's minimum $200, and you can go and you can see, what's available. Secondly is a managed service where we can help you find those podcasts, and we can get the hosts to do host read ads, and that's a minimum of $1,000 per campaign. And then in the next couple of weeks, we should have programmatic up and running. And programmatic is going to be suited more for the larger brands because you need a DSP partner. But as we'll also have some announcements over the next month or two that even on the self-serve side, you'll be able to get more granular with the Nielsen data that we're going to be importing. So that's exciting too.
Absolutely. And I think also, from a podcaster standpoint, it just means that more ads are coming your way. So if you are podcasting overall, if you're podcasting with Podbean, of course, you can take advantage. The market is growing and this rising tide is going to lift all the podcast boats. So,
And then also as a podcaster, because we've briefly touched on podcasters wanting to run their
yeah.
ads on other podcasts too,
Yes.
using the same engine of the ads marketplace and dynamic ad insertion. If you're a podcaster that's hosted with Podbean, if you go down in your podcast dashboard to the left side of it, you should be able to see this button that says ads management, and everything that Kerry is discussing is there. But there's also a button at the top that allows you to run your advertisement for your show on other podcasts using that same engine. And there's a couple of different pre-made templates with impressions and cost per that you can use to run anywhere from a 7-day to a 30-day campaign to run your show's advertisement on other shows. And you get a breakdown in much the same way of what kind of content do I want to run my ad content on. So for anyone that's looking to grow their show using that medium
Yes.
and really understand, what this could look like for them, it's an invaluable tool that I think a lot more people have started to use. And if you're someone that wants to see that growth in your show to make it even more appealing for advertisers to come to your show, I'd really definitely recommend checking that tool out as well.
Absolutely. And we talk about this, when we're talking about how to grow your podcast, how to grow your audience. One of the best tips for how to get people to find your show, to listen to your show, to subscribe to your show is to advertise your podcast on other
Mhm.
podcasts. It really does work because if you're advertising outside of podcasting, you don't even know if that audience listens to podcasts.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a really, really valuable audience growth tool for podcasters as well. So definitely a great point, John. Kerry, as you mentioned, we have a lot of tools here at Podbean. We're going to have links to our sponsorship marketplace. We're going to have links to our dynamic ad insertion. And we'll pop your email here in the notes and description of this episode in case anybody wants to approach you directly about managed campaigns, anything like that. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to read our brief outro and then we will conclude for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Podcasting Smarter for our September live panel event, How to Make a Podcast Ad, where the experts here at Podbean sit down to discuss what goes into making an impactful podcast ad, from music, host read, having a clear value proposition, and more. Today, we were joined by Podbean's Senior VP of Advertising, Kerry Tracy, and Director of Customer Success, John Kiernan, hosted by me, Podbean's Head of Events, Norma Jean Belenke. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast. If you joined late or want to have another listen to this conversation, or you're listening now on our podcast, you can replay on Podbean's YouTube channel and on our Podcasting Smarter podcast. We are brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 620,000 podcasts. To start your podcast today, head over to podbean.com. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for next month's live panel in October, on October 20th, How to Become a Podcast Editor, using your indie podcast skills for freelance, remote work, or to create a business, in collaboration with Steph Fuccio of Global Podcast Editors and featuring some incredible podcast editors from around the world. Happy podcasting, everyone, and thank you for joining us.